Hello everybody, this is Robert Ris for Chesscastle, and in this video series I'm going to have a look at one very nice attacking line from the black side in the Queen's Gambit accepted. So let's just get started. It's d4, d5, c4, d takes c4, and we are going to have a look at one of the most principled continuations, which is e4. And this move has always been causing a headache for most Queen's Gambit accepted players because white is occupying the center, and well, basically if white can just regain the pawn on c4 without too many problems, he is enjoying a very nice space advantage with free development. So for quite some time I had been experimenting with this opening, but I didn't really like playing it with black when I knew that my opponent would play third move e4. Of course, I had some things prepared there, but I think it was back in 2014 when my eye was especially caught by one specific game of Jon Ludwig Hammer against Romain Edouard. And in that game, black introduced this move b5. Just a very principled move trying to keep the pawn. And after a4, c6, a takes b5, c takes b5, knight c3. Well, this is interesting stuff which has been seen before, but on earlier occasions black had been defending the pawn very passively with the move bishop to d7, a move which never really appealed to me. But in the aforementioned game, Edouard introduced this move a6, which kind of keeps the pawn chain intact. And well, if black would be able to do so, I believe he will just be a pawn up. But of course there is this move knight takes b5, taking advantage of the pawn pinned on the a file. But the point of black's play is that he is ready to keep the pawn chain intact. He just takes the knight, allowing white to take the rook, and after bishop to b7, attacking the rook needs to move again. Let's say it goes to a1, and rather than taking the pawn on e4, which doesn't look too great because white will play the move f3, bishop to d5 for example, and now there is the move b3, and white will do everything to just break down this this nice pawn chain. And if he managed to do so, then I believe that, well, black doesn't have sufficient compensation. So rather than taking on e4, black opts for the move e6, which is a very fine move just to continue developing. Your intention is to take the pawn on e4 at a suitable moment. And here there are a lot of options, and let me just start showing you the stem game of this line I mentioned before. Bishop e2 could be played, and once again, rather than taking the pawn, you develop your knight to f6 with the idea to take with a knight on e4, because I believe that the knight is better placed on e4 than the bishop, especially in combination with the move bishop b4 check, as we will see later. In general, I believe that knights are better placed in the center. You can keep the bishops on distance. So knight f6, knight to f3, and well, this was still played back in the game Hammer against Edouard, where black took on e4, and after castling kingside, it seems like black obtains very decent compensation by gaining a nice grip on the light squares in the center. Particularly the d5 square could be a very nice outpost. And in that game, black went for the move queen to d5. Of course, initiating some tactical issues on this diagonal against the pawn on g2, but okay, mate is not apparent yet. Black won a very nice game. Even queens were traded off and an exchange down. Apparently the minor pieces were still quite good, and that's basically thanks to the pawns on b5 and c4, which are restricting the movement of those pieces. However, I believe that white's play could have been improved, and particularly in this situation, I think that the move b3 would have been an excellent decision, trying to break down the pawn chain. I believe this doesn't really offer black full equality. So instead of knight takes e4, other moves have been attempted here as well. For example, bishop to b4 check is a move which appeals much better to me. Bishop d2, bishop takes, and now, well, you have a decision to make whether how to recapture. You can take with a knight, with the queen, or even with a king, but that looks bizarre, of course. Normally you take with the queen, because if you take with a knight, then the pawn on d4 would be hanging. So you take with the queen, and now knight takes e4. Well, this is interesting, because now one pair of minor pieces have been exchanged, and well, probably this isn't too bad for white. On the other hand, I believe that black has reasonable compensation here. For example, this was seen in a game of Mamedyarov against Kazimshanov in Baku 2014. That game went with queen b4, trying to keep the king out of preventing it from castling. Queen d5, and now white went for rook a5, putting pressure on the pawn on b5. But well, if you castle kingside, then there would follow knight c6, and of course queen b4 wouldn't make sense at all. Queen would have to move again. So you go queen a5, sorry, rook a5, and now the knight jumps back to d6. Looks a little bit awkward, but well, everything is well protected, and at the moment white has difficulties to get those minor pieces activated. Mamedyarov went for knight e5, very sharp continuation, initiating ideas with bishop f3. After queen takes d4, rook takes b5 was played. And now, after knight takes b5, queen takes b5, knight to d7, knight takes c4, bishop to d5, knight to e3 was played, and now a funny sequence of moves, king e7, attempting to bring the rook into play with rook b8 would be very nice for black, but white can still make a draw with a spectacular move, queen takes d5, as of course if you take with a pawn, that would be met with knight f5. So you cannot win a piece with white because black recaptures with the queen, and after knight takes, e takes d5. Position is just pretty much balanced. However, instead of knight takes b5, you can actually include this move, knight to a6. Very spectacular move, attacking the queen, and of course the queen should keep an eye on the rook. So queen a5, and now black castles. And well, there are still a couple of threats. Of course, you're ready to take on b5 very soon. So rook takes b7, knight takes b7, queen takes a6, queen takes e5, and this is actually quite good for black, because the knight cannot really be taken, because if you do that, there's queen a5 check, very unpleasant check, because on the next move queen a1 is coming, and you will pick up the rook wherever the king goes. So interesting line. I believe this is everything is all right for black. Queen e3 has been tried in later games, but well, I believe black is doing reasonably okay there. For example, bishop to d5 is a good move. Black would like to obtain a very nice grip on the light squares. White's best attempt is to play b3, breaking down that pawn chain. But after c takes b3, bishop takes b5, knight to d7, everything seems to be alright. Looks quite scary, but black also has a trump on b3. For example, if you play knight to e5, there would follow castling kingside. Excellent move. Because if you take with the bishop the knight, there is b2, hitting the rook. If the rook moves, there is queen to a5. And suddenly things are looking pretty grim. There are a lot of tactical ideas connected with the passed b-pawn. There's one other option, which is to take with a knight on d7. But there would follow b2 once again. If you move the rook, you should take into account this move, queen a5 check. So very unpleasant threats to deal with. Castling kingside, b takes a1, rook takes, and well, after rook e8, it looks a little bit awkward with the rook on e8, with the spin, but there's no good way to take advantage of it, and I believe that black should be able to hold the balance. let's return. Instead of knight e5 in one other game of two talented players like Benjamin Gledura and Romain Edouard, white went for the move castling kingside. Castling kingside, bishop a4, trying to wrap up this pawn on b3. And if white would be able to do so, then actually he would just be an exchange up, with play being restricted to one wing. But well, it's an exchange after all. So black should play very forcefully. b2, rook ab1, and now knight b6, attacking the bishop on a4, bishop to b3, and now excellent move, knight d6, key move, because the point is that if you take on b2, there will follow a knight jump to c4, hitting the queen and rook. So after bishop takes d5, e takes d5, white doesn't have anything better but giving back the exchange. Rook takes b2, knight to b4, and well, after regaining the exchange, the position is still quite balanced. So when I was analyzing all those lines long time ago, I thought that everything should be okay. There were more exciting lines which I'm going to deal with you in the next videos. But I think the initial games, the stem games of this line were giving black very reasonable prospects, and that made me enthusiastic, delving deeper into the ins and outs of this position. So after studying the first couple of lines we discussed in the previous video with moves like bishop e2 and knight f3, basically those moves are transposing from one line into another, well, I felt confident, and of course I realized that it was a kind of new line, and other lines had to be checked as well. So I understood that white is an exchange up, and white has several ways to continue his development. So I decided to have a look at other moves as well. And of course, when you understand that the pawns on b5 and c4 are like a nuisance to deal with, one of the first moves you have a look at is the move b3. It's a very tempting move, trying to break down that pawn chain. But the problem is that here it can just be met with the move bishop to b4. And this is actually going wrong already for white, because it's check. You don't want to play king e2. It's not a great developing move. So you have to play bishop d2, but then there follows the move c3. And this is suddenly very unpleasant, because you're attacking the bishop with your pawn, so you're threatening to take the bishop. But if the bishop moves, you have c2 with a discovery on the queen and on the king.